Which is good, since I slipped in a poem from last week that we weren't anticipating.
Which was perfect. It was great. So this is a Mary Oliver poem. I've sent it to Cease to put in the chat, but she'll put it in later. I want you to sort of just be with this poem. She titled this poem Life Story, which I found fascinating. And this is how she wrote Life Story. When I lived under the black oaks, I felt I was made of leaves. When I lived by Little Sister Pond, I dreamed I was the feather of the blue heron left on the shore. I was the pond lily, my root delicate as an artery, my face like a star, my happiness brimming. Later, I was the footsteps that follow the sea. I knew the tides. I knew the ingredients of the rack. I knew the elder, the red-throated loon with his uplifted beak and his smart eye. I felt I was the tip of the wave, the pearl of water on the eider's glossy back. No, there's no escaping, nor would I want to escape this outgo, this foot loosening, this solution to gravity and a single shape. Now I am here. Later, I will be there. I will be that small cloud staring down at the water, the one that stalls, that lifts its white legs, that looks like a lamb. So we'll put that into the chat. Poetry, art, music, so many beautiful expressions of this mysterious theme, death and birth, have been explored. So today we're going to start with a little bit of, I'm going to say, a conversation, and we're going to ask you to be a part of that conversation with us in the chat as we go.
So, well, physical alchemy deals really with an altering and a transforming of the properties of the physical world. As Jillian referenced before, alchemy is usually related to the concept from many centuries back of attempting to transform base metals into gold. Spiritual alchemy is connected with freeing your spiritual self. What do we free our spiritual self from? Well, really, our fears, our limiting belief systems, and a lack of self-acceptance. Alchemy truly then is the art of transformation, inner liberation, change.
Yeah, I'm gonna repeat that part. So freeing limiting beliefs or the lack of self-acceptance allows, in a way, the alchemy to be the art of transformation, inner liberation, and change. And it's so appropriate in the Reconnective Healing experience. Again, at the center of your familiarity with energy, light, and information is transformation, liberation, and change. It's never any more specific than that. It's that open. It's that unending. So when we talk about the alchemy, if you will, of death specifically, and we're going to explore birth in these next upcoming weeks in a way, we probably more than anything can simply turn to what I call the funerary rites, funeral rites for the dead, the rites of passage for the living. But ultimately, grief isn't really a ritual or a practice. And in death, this often is the sort of the center, this loss, this grieving, the absence, right? And when we step into a reconnective healing experience, often we are exploring not the awareness of absence, but the absence of awareness. Okay. So this is a beautiful way. Again, we're really trying to tie things together here so that we are exploring energy, light, and information in these themes. So grief is really not a ritual or a practice. It's an intimately personal process of transmuting sorrow and the pain of loss into something else, maybe something easier to live with, like a memory, acceptance, fondness, love.
A different understanding than we may have carried on the way in.
And those memory, acceptance, fondness, love, those rituals may be part of an alchemical process, but I'm going to suggest that grief is no more confined by a ritual framework than love is bound by a wedding ceremony. And I'm using that example. I heard this spoken in this way, and it drove me to really consider that. Again, often love, we think, is bound through a wedding ceremony, but that really isn't love. Love is not a ritual. And so we want to look at where the alchemical sort of approach starts to get muddled a little bit.
So how about take a moment and think of a time where you may have been involved in a ritual around death, and responded a little, or more than a little, differently than others around you expected you to, or even you expected yourself to. And in that unusual response, you may well have noticed that there was alchemy. Maybe it didn't come about the way people thought it, quote unquote, should. And maybe if you responded or acted in the way it was expected of you, that alchemy might not have taken place in that way. So if something comes to mind, and I'm sure it can, please feel free to raise your hand and share with us, or input something into the chat, and let's play with this concept for a moment. Cecilia, if you see hands, please feel free to call. We'll keep our eye on the chat.
And we'll just repeat the question. Was there a time when you have been involved in a ritual around death and responded differently than others around you, or the way that others expected you to? I can remember even from last week, someone had said that in the presence of death, she found herself laughing.
Mm-hmm.
So again,
what people who don't understand sometimes would consider inappropriate, when one really from the higher view, we realize that it was ultimately appropriate. It could be laughter at a time when it's not expected. It could be the presence of tears for someone you thought you really felt nothing for. It could be anything in between or sideways.
Well, I will simply share, in my own experience, raised Catholic, it's very somber ceremony, very quiet, respectful ceremony. And then in later years, I was going to support a friend who'd lost their mother, and it was in a Baptist church. And it was a loud celebration. It was dance and music. It was just so very wonderful and different from what I had grown up knowing about this process. It was just beautiful. It was a beautiful experience to know that it's celebrated differently and celebrated really this new chapter of life.
Yeah. Thank you, Cece.
Who would like to share?
Melanie's hand is up. Melanie, please unmute.
I
As
was over here
as
giggling.
long as one hand remains on the wheel, Melanie.
I'm not driving. I'm sitting
Okay.
still right now.
Okay.
I was giggling because as she's talking, I'm thinking, oh my God, I was raised, and well, barely raised, but I went to Sunday school. My mom and dad would, send us off on Sundays. I'm the youngest of 6. So Sunday morning, they were like, get your shit, get dressed and get out. And we'd go to this Baptist Sunday school. And they literally taught me, yeah, it was loud and we had music and we sung and all that was great, right? But they scared the shit out of me. And they watched, when I was 8 years old, they showed me this movie called The Rapture. And they taught us, that was real shit. Like, if you don't agree to this, you don't get the 666 stamped on your head, they're going to cut your head off. And like, I was 8 years old. It freaked me out. I was scared to death of church. Then I tried to just ignore it. Like, well, there's people that have never been to that church. There's people that have never heard of Jesus. There's people who have never read a book. There's people, like, at that time they had discovered some people somewhere, like in Africa or somewhere, that was like a tribe of people that had never seen any other humans. And that made me realize, like, okay, they're telling me what they want me to, they're telling me what they want me to do, but they're not reaching everyone. So love you, baby. I'll see you later. You can't, I don't even know what I'm trying to say.
Well, let me get Mel. Let me suggest one thing here, because I think
okay.
You're touching on a kind of a cornerstone here, and I want to bring this back specifically a little bit into the alchemy portion of it rather than religion. But I will say that in these rituals, as you and Cecilia were so thrust into, and fears and understandings were formed, really in order to feel safe. Again, the ritual has the tendency to focus on the absence of awareness, the absence of the awareness of a person being there or a thing being there. They're no longer in your form, physical presence. Whereas the alchemy or the actual transformation really lies in the awareness of absence, right?
Yes.
Not the absence of awareness. The absence of awareness is the finite. There's an absence of awareness. We even think of that sometimes, and it gets difficult to turn it, right side up. The walk towards the alchemy of transformation, inner liberation, change, is really to be in the recognition of the awareness of absence, the awareness of the unknown, the awareness of nothingness, right? So that is the absence of awareness. At a certain point, it becomes the absence of awareness. You do this every time you go to sleep. It is not uncommon. It is most common. And we want to sort of invite this in.
So I want to give us another example, but first, flashing back on just for a moment, Mel, and your story just reminded me of a childhood joke, and fill in the blanks of where it was, but it was about someone dies and they go up to heaven and they're getting a tour and they're led past one room and they look in and here are the people of this religion. They walk past another room, here are the people of this religion, walk past another, here are the people of that religion. And then the angel guide holds up his fingers and says, shh, walk quietly by this room. And he said, why? He said, well, they're the people of that religion and they think that they're the only ones up here. So So, but the question I wanted to lead into is, what else might you have experienced alchemy around the fear of or an interaction with death? Alchemy is an interesting thing. We hear stories all the time and we think about them and absorb them, and they influence us to some degree or another. But for me, one of the first alchemy experiences was hearing my mother explain to me what happened during my birth process when she gave birth to me and she had her life after death experience. And she explained it with such detail, certainty, and knowingness, that the resonance, the vibration of the truth and the uncovering were so incontrovertible. It was something I had never heard, something not discussed, and yet I walked away from the sharing of that story no longer having a fear of death. I want you to know that my grandmother had died recently, and I had a fear of death at that point. The fear that I had was an egoic fear of death. The fear that I had was a knowingness that, without even thinking about it cerebrally, of the eternal that I am, the finite that I am. And therefore, I was trying to reconcile that with the infinite experience of human existence, not knowing enough about, or thinking about decomposition or anything. It was simply the fact of knowing that once you die, you end up in a box, if your family believes in burial, in a box in the dark, 6 feet underground forever. I did not really like that. So I had questions about it. I came home and I asked my mother about that. And that's when she shared that story with me. And my fear of death, completely gone, never returned, never vacillated, never changed. So you can say it was that moment when the base metal turned to gold. And that to me was an alchemical moment. And we're inviting you. I would love some of you to share yours, whether you want to input some into the chat, or would really love you to raise your hands. I do see one hand is up already. Is Barbara's?
Barbara. Yes. Barbara, please unmute.
Hi there. Mine
Hi.
was actually a little tiny bit slower, but a similar type of process where I was with patients who were getting ready to transition, either quite suddenly or end of life, like in hospice or something. And they would refer to entities or beings that they could see in the room, but I couldn't. And at first I didn't really think too much about it, but after a while there'd be enough of these experiences, I'd hear enough that led me to think of there's something else going on, and none of them seemed frightened. So that really helped me, just having that happen over and over. And then there were times later where I was actually able to just kind of sense some of those beings in the room, not understanding what they were, but I just felt this presence. And the person who was getting ready to transition would just have this draw towards them. And so that was exciting to me.
So exciting. And it's such an honor to be someone, honestly, in the way that you have been in the world, Barbara, really being the witness to end of life and being an integral part of those enormous aha moments. They are alchemical for sure. People who are in hospice really have been gifted with the alchemy of death, unlike, in my view, anyone else. But I think just based on what Barbara was saying, the ways in which we face death, both our own and those of loved ones or patients or just community people, is vital to our understanding of our truest nature. It's an unending death rebirth cycle, and you can know that alchemically or in that
Well, right. And, Lisa shared something with us about what's that chart with the helium and oxygen, and they call it a chemical chart or something.
yes.
I can't think of what it's called exactly, but about a few minerals on that, and about why helium, curium, and barium are called healing elements. And she explained quite articulately, because if you can't helium, you can't curium, then you bury them.
This is a joke day. Hang
Cut
on.
it out.
Interspersed jokes. Awesome. We love that.
But we really would love you to share if you've got any other alchemical changes.
We have Steph, you had raised your hand a few times and then lowered it, but here you are again. Steph, please unmute.
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So it's a bit of a distant case, I guess. It happened in 2008. But I have to start a little early. So it was my first year in university, and I had my midterm exams, and I somehow lost track of time. And I thought that my, next exam is in 2 days. So I was like over the book studying. And then my mother calls me. No, I'm sorry. My cousin calls me, and she's like, because we studied together, she said, "Where are you? Why didn't you show up at the exam?" So I started panicking. Oh my God, I thought it was like 2 days. So I hung up, trying to calm myself down, getting ready to go down to campus. And then my mother called me, and she says, "Your grandmother, her mother, just passed away." And I had like this overwhelming experience where I normally, in general, I don't mourn for people who passed. I just see things, I guess, as just a transformation, not as a final outcome. So I was like, okay. She said, "Don't worry, look after your school and everything, and I'll take care of everything else." I said, okay. So I left. I went down to school. I saw my cousin after the exam, wanted to speak to her, and I said, I pulled her out of the cafeteria with all other colleagues there, and I said, "Grandma just passed away." And so she burst in tears, I guess like most people would do. And I realized that I don't cry. I'm like stone faced, like I don't have any like expression, or at least I didn't feel like I need to. So 2 days later, when the funeral was, I had to be at the exam, so I missed the funeral. So then my grandfather, who was basically alone after her death, he enclosed himself for months. He didn't want to speak to people. He didn't want to, go out or see anyone, talk to anyone. And last time I saw him was before I came to the States. We saw the day before I left, and we kind of separated with like very warm feelings. So 2 months later, I was in Las Vegas, and my mother calls me, and she goes, "Your grandfather just passed." And that was quite unexpected, at least for an elderly person with not a single like disease or any medications he's on, nothing. He's like the healthiest older person you've ever known. And that came as a surprise to us, well, to me especially. And then because of my understanding of life and death, I don't, as I said, mourn for people. I just see it as a real transition into, the real life, so to speak. So all of a sudden, I find myself soaking in tears for days. Like I would be, as soon as I wake up in the morning, tears would just start falling, and I have no explanation why, because I don't feel like crying. Like I don't feel sad. I feel like just as I'm talking to you right now, and it's not something that I can control. It was just overpowering, and they went on and on for hours. And I reached a point where they exhausted me so much that I would pass out sometimes. I would be out in my car in a parking lot somewhere, and that would go on for hours.
Mm.
And I woke up from this brief moment sleep, and as soon as I opened my eyes, and this thought again crosses my mind, and tears would start falling all over again. So the same story repeated day after day after day. And I had to call my mom. I said, Mom, I don't feel like crying, but these tears they're just going. It's like a waterfall, like Niagara Falls. She goes, I feel exactly the same way. I don't cry, like I don't have the need to cry. It's just the feelings, like those tears that come down. And then we thought that because Grandpa passed in his sleep, maybe because it was sort of unconscious for his physical mind, he maybe wanted to say goodbye to everyone, not go that
Okay,
way.
Steph,
Yes.
you're such on a beautiful tipping point here right now. And here's the beautiful part about where, if we can support you in almost not going into the next layer of the story, because the freedom of the alchemy of water flowing from us without thought, direction, really something provoking, it is the inner liberation. It is the transformation and change. When we then attach the why we think this ritual, why this was being evoked, the way that he passed, what he didn't say, what he did say, we shrink it into this ritual. And in and around that, what that perpetuates for the next time, and I'm going to lay it out to you this way, is that we so desperately believe in some heroic measure that we might take to avert death. Spells, rituals, potions, amulets, healing energies, thoughts, prayers. We all of a sudden get bound to this. They didn't get to say what they needed to say, you see, but
Or we didn't get to say what we wanted to say.
that is the shrinking of something that was so beautifully vast and was the alchemy. So the alchemy before it becomes the ritual, the before, the beyond, when it is just an experience.
So we're gonna share more.
But that was amazing to
this.
share.
Yes, that was really fascinating. We're going to talk about this more, and I know some of the people listening to this really do want to hear more. So with a heavy heart, I have to say to you YouTubers, I'm sorry we have to say goodbye at the moment for you, but you can go to the link down below if you want to be a part of this. There's a link in the chat to find out more and to join us and the Reconnective Life community and some of these sharings. And hopefully you'll be a part of us and grow along with us. That would be terrific. Everyone, some fears are inherent, are innate. And others that we think of as inherent or innate are learned. Like our first fears that are innate, that we recognize even in just months of being born, if not earlier, is the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. The fears around death, actually there's a term for that. The fear of death is called thanatophobia. Thanato phobia. Thanatophobia is a learned fear. And it's learned. Hey there, family. Dr. Eric and Jillian here.
Welcome, everyone.
And we're very excited about Reconnective Life, our first online global community. This is the most exciting way we've been able to get together since I founded the Reconnection. Is to be a place where we can do things together. We'll move into breakout rooms at times when that's appropriate. We'll have energy interactions and meditations and exercises. In other words, expect things you haven't seen before.
You are so charged.
things.
He is so lit about every new way we get to be together every day. Just be together. Let us just speak a little bit about what is going to be the shape of this community.
In this community, we can share and discover more. Here we can talk to each other, we can chat, we can learn from and about one another. Jillian, me, our life leaders, and you will be in daily conversation with you. Weekly, we will have Facebook Lives.
We will be with you every Wednesday. Sometimes it'll be just Eric. On occasion, it might just be me. Sometimes it'll be the two of us. It's all about giving you a way to look at the week living in the frequencies.
And in every fourth week, we will include a live Q&A so we can talk about things that have been coming up for us, discuss back and forth, share, grow, expand together.
And the ever-growing library of content that has been created over 20 years that will be on demand for you. It will be on-demand content for you to view, enjoy, share again with your inner circle.
And monthly, we are going to have live Zoom retreats. We're going to bring in some exercises and experiences and things that previously we've reserved for our physical retreats, you know, when we were in the different location resorts and things. And we're modifying them so that we can work with these with you in your home, in your living room, in your den. Put into the chat line, what is facility? We're having these weekly Zoom in-depth Q&As.
Finally, we have a place and space to just define what does that really mean living in the frequencies.
This is something that is in all of us.
Everyone can do this.
It doesn't matter how many levels you've gone through or how well you know the programs. It's a community that allows us to recognize how interrelated we all are as receivers of energy, light, and information.
See you there.
Reconnective Life, living in the frequencies every day.